This is the hat. Luster Bayless is going to be telling you about it a little bit later on.
Tommy Lee wore this in Lonesome Dove, but I wore this in Conager, but I wore it more like that.
Winner Tommy Lee Jones is Woodrow called.
I hate rude behavior in a man. Won't tolerate it.
His word was law.
What the hell was that?
He was, well, first of all, he runs a hell bitching at Tony's horse. Tony's horse falls down. He gets off, and he picks up this branding iron. And every actor that's ever done a fight with Jones gets clocked. To this day, he cannot do a fight.
Let's talk about Lonesome Dove. Went into production in 1988, written by Larry McMurtry, because Larry McMurtry had done HUD, Last Picture Show, and in fact, Last Picture Show with Peter Bogdanovich had been so successful, and Ben Johnson, of course, a roper and an actor, got his Academy Award for that film. Bogdanovich got together with McMurtry and wanted to do an epic Western that starred Henry Fonda, John Wayne, and Jimmy Stewart. And so a script was written, and because of the old guys in it, they had a very difficult time. In fact, they couldn't raise the money to do this. It languished, and until Larry McMurtry decided to turn it into a book, which became a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, one of the greatest American novels ever written. People still read it and reread it and watch the miniseries over and over again. When you think Westerns, you think classic Westerns, you say, it's Shane, it's Stagecoach, it's High Noon, it's The Searchers, it's The Wild Bunch, it's Lonesome Dove. Well, Lonesome Dove is the only one in that group that's not a feature film. It is right up there with those classic feature film Westerns. And the woman who discovered this and said, I'm going to make this into a series if I can, she had a music background. She really had produced some Emmy-winning specials. She had mentored Michael Jackson. She was a Motown executive, and she said, something about this is going to make it work. And she's here today, Suzanne De Passe. How did you go about it? Because it's not something that people would normally think would happen, a music executive going after a Western.
Well, I guess it was a man bites dog story at the beginning, because I was vacationing with my ex-husband in Tucson, Arizona, at a fitness resort called Canyon Ranch. And Gloria Steinem was there. And she said, we're going off campus tonight, because, it was lots of lettuce leaves and exercise. And as soon as she said Mexican food, I said, we're in. And at that dinner were friends of hers, Larry McMurtry, and a friend of his, Leslie Silko, a great author also. We hung out, we ate Mexican food, and Larry and I really hit it off. And I said to him, what have you got kicking around the old trunk that hasn't been produced yet? Because he had also done Terms of Endearment by that time. This was like, I'm going to say March of '85. He said, I have a book coming out in June, but you probably wouldn't be interested in it. It's a Western. And I said, au contraire, Larry. I've been a horsewoman all my life. I love Westerns. I grew up in America just like everybody else. And the romance of the West is, embedded in my soul, so yes, I would be interested. So his agent, a very famous agent, who went by the name of Swifty Lazar, and they didn't call him Swifty for nothing, so they sent over the next day boxes of unbound manuscript that was the selling tool for Lonesome Dove. And I began taking a box home every night. And they arrived in my office on a flatbed trolley. I mean, nobody could carry them all, because the book ended up being like 935 pages, and this was double-spaced. Anyway, before I finished it, I said, this is the best thing I've ever read. This is fantastic. And called Irving Lazar. I didn't dare call him Swifty. And we made a deal, and he charged me an exorbitant amount of money for an 18-month option. And I, not knowing anything about this business at the time, fresh from the record side, now president of Motown Productions, chartered to do film and television, said, okay. And I took $50,000 of Barry Gordy's money and sent it to Swifty Lazar, and I was in business with Lonesome Dove. Yet to be published. 2 days after the check cleared, one of my associates comes in and said, Suzanne, I don't know how to break this to you, but Lonesome Dove has been shopped to every studio and every network, and everyone has passed on it. And I was feeling much like the goat. Little did they know I would go from goat to goddess when the book won the Pulitzer Prize the following spring for fiction. And what's interesting about that to me, and has guided me through the rest of my career, is that you never know and you only can trust your instinct.
I know Lynn Kressel, I think, did the casting, got an Emmy for that, but what was that process like? Was it like, we're not casting cowboys?
Well, actually, when it comes to Gus and Cole, I'm sure everybody knows Bobby Duvall is quite the horseman. And Tommy Lee Jones has been playing polos, and he's a Texan, and he is a cowboy. So with respect to that, now, when it came to some of the others, I'll never forget watching Danny Glover learn how to ride. And from the back, it looked like a runaway taxi cab with the doors open. His legs were sticking out. And I thought, oh my God, this ain't gonna work. But everybody stuck with it. I don't think one has to be a cowboy or cowgirl to do great work surrounded by the combination of authentically gifted and congruently cowboy folks. And as long as the heart was there and committed to it, our cast was amazing. But I think one interesting anecdote about bringing on Tommy Lee, because in the beginning, we offered Bobby the role of Call. And he read it and said, no, I want to be Gus. And we went, wow. So we needed to find a Call. And we had reached out to Jim Garner, who had just unfortunately had a heart attack or something. He was in Hawaii. He couldn't do it. And there was this round robin of who we're going to get to play Call, and oh my God, who we're going to get to play Call. And every actor, either the network wouldn't approve, or this wouldn't happen, or they didn't want to do it. And finally, we came to Tommy Lee Jones. And I remember calling Kim LeMasters at CBS to say, great news, Tommy Lee Jones has read this and he wants to do it. He was fresh off of Executioner's Song and not really hot at the time. And I'll never forget, Kim said to me, Suzanne, this is CBS, not PBS. And so when you think about it, all of the sort of stumbling blocks and challenges that we collectively shared getting Lonesome Dove to the screen were so interesting, because in hindsight, you'd think everybody was joined arm in arm, kumbaya, it's going to be great. The Friday before February 4th, a Sunday when it aired in 1989, not one person from CBS called us to wish us luck. This one was skiing, this other one was homesick. Nobody said a word because they were all scared out of their wits.
They were so frightened about it that, and unlike most miniseries where they'd run one a week and the numbers would build, they said, you know, this is a Western, it's going to tank. Let's just run them 4 nights in a row and we'll burn it off, so if it doesn't work, we won't get that hurt. Well,
Unbelievable.
Through the roof.
We did a guest screening at the old, what's now the Sony studio in the Cary Grant Theater. And we sent out invitations, come and spend the day in Lonesome Dove. And we figured our friends would come and people would come. We started at noon, and we went and had a dinner break and all of that kind of stuff. Only 2 people were gone by the time it was over. And that told us something. Anyway, when the show aired, needless to say, I couldn't even see past the people's behinds taking bows for what their part was in bringing Lonesome Dove to the screen. It was hilarious. And they had said if we got a 23 share of the audience, 23% of the audience, they would be happy. And so Monday morning, I'm in New York. It's like a blizzard. I'm in my hotel room, 2-bedroom suite with my associate, Suzanne Huston, and I call Howard Stringer's office. And his assistant, male assistant at the time, was very much like Carlton the doorman. Good morning, Mr. Stringer's office. I said, oh, hello, my name is Suzanne De Passe, and I'm one of the executive producers on Lonesome Dove, and I was just wondering if you had the numbers. Hold on, please. He comes back, he says, what was the name of that program again? And I'm thinking, I'm not going back to LA, I'm going to keep going east. It's Europe for me, it's over. And with the number 23 share in my head, I said, it's Lonesome Dove. He said, just a minute, please. He came back and said, well, last night, Lonesome Dove, over the 2 hours, had a 26, and I thought, oh my God, this is so great, 0.8 rating and a 48 share of the audience. Unprecedented, unbelievable. The Super Bowl doesn't even get those numbers now. And that began the unbelievable sort of national obsession with Lonesome Dove. People really loved our show. And to this day, it's just one of the great moments. It was one of the most incredible, beautiful experiences of my life. The people that I met, the experience of being kind of the only girl in the producer pool. So I was always fighting the guys, Simon Wincer and Dyson Lovell and all of the, saying that you can't take out the two little pigs following the wagon. You can't do that. You can't take out Clara begging Gus to stay and that there's land just down the way, because that's the romance of the piece. And if I was anything, I was the romance cop when it came to editing, because a lot of it a lot of it was, you know, heavily testosterone, and sometimes you guys just miss the point. But one of the other things that's so gratifying about Lonesome Dove, and I think the women here will bear me out, is that Lonesome Dove appealed to men and women in equal measure. And that, to me, was and is one of the lasting, indelible results of Lonesome Dove, is that it wasn't just for guys, and it wasn't just for girls, it was for everyone. And that, to me, makes it why it stood the test of time, because it wasn't just some thing relegated. Everybody got it. Everybody related to it. Sometime later, we did a miniseries called Buffalo Girls with Anjelica Huston and Melanie Griffith. And I remember fighting with Jeff Sagansky. He said, well, there's no shootout, and there's no cattle drive, and there's no action. I said, trust me, there is action. Gabriel Byrne, the whole thing. And it's funny because Liev Schreiber, it was like his first job. And on his first day, he had to do a bathtub scene with Melanie Griffith. I've never seen anybody more nervous in my life, but I digress from Lonesome Dove. Anyway, even Buffalo Girls shocked everybody by how well it did, and it broke other records, speaking to the real significance of a Larry McMurtry start, because he had written the book of Buffalo Girls also. And if you are ever so lucky as to be able to bring one of his books to the screen, do it, because it just has a magical power all its own, and we are all lucky to have source material like what Larry McMurtry can do.
And we're all lucky to have Suzanne De Passe join us today and give us the backstory. Thank you. we talked about Bob Duvall and Tommy Lee and Rick Schroder and Tim Scott, all these wonderful actors. Well, we're lucky to have one with us here today. Of course, he played Roscoe Brown. Barry Corbin, could you come up and join us?
You having possum for your supper, are you?
I thought it was a real guy when I saw Barry in that, but it floored me. I'm going, where did they find all these people?
They found me down in Arkansas.
Something you should know about Barry, too. He does Shakespeare like he's from England. Truly wonderful. Anyway, nice to see you here, Barry.
Well, it's good to be here. You were talking about the screening that we had 2 people left. I took my mother and dad to that screening, and my dad sat there for the first 2 episodes and didn't go out for a smoke. So I knew we were all right. And then we had the dinner break, and I said, well, do you want to go home now? Are you tired? He said, well, hell no, you go on home. I'll take a cab if you don't want to stay. I said, I'm not going to miss the rest of this. Well, they were from Texas, and my dad knew all the source material, the Goodnight Loving Trail and all that. So all the way home and until the wee hours of the morning, he bored me with telling me stuff that I'd been hearing all my life anyway. My dad was a state senator, and he held the world's record for the longest filibuster at one time for about 15 minutes. Whenever I did anything wrong, he'd try to break that record. I miss him, really. I miss having somebody talk to me for 14 hours.
The premiere of a major television event. Tonight, the legend continues. A Pulitzer Prize-winning masterpiece comes to life in an epic adventure. Lonesome Dove.
Anyway, we had a wonderful time on that show. I was the luckiest guy on the show because I worked the first 2 weeks and shot all the Arkansas stuff and a lot of the Texas stuff. Then I went away and did 3 more movies. And I came back like 3 months later. And when I left, everybody was very happy. And I came back 3 months later, and everybody was just looking at, mad. Everybody was mad at everybody else. I said to Tim Scott, I said, Tim, what happened? And he said, cattle drive.
We come to this place to make money. There wasn't nothing about fun in the deal.
All I had to do was ride HUD around and kind of looked like I didn't know what I was doing. But it was fun.
Now, Barry, he's a good hand, too. This man knows how to sit a saddle, and you want to be on a trail with him. Ricky Schroder told me that before it started, Tommy Lee invited everybody to his place in Texas to ride for a couple of weeks so that it looked like the ones who didn't know how to ride. And I know you did a lot of walking in Lonesome Dove, but were you part of that, too?
Huh?
Were you part of that going to Tommy Lee's?
No. They didn't. I wasn't supposed to know how to do anything, so I didn't have to learn to do anything. I just had to unlearn a bunch of stuff.
July, when do you aim to start after that murderer, Jake Spoon?
Jake is on the run from a shooting in Arkansas, where hapless July Johnson is sheriff.
Maybe I better go on and catch Jake Spoon.
Tell us a little bit about what it's like working with Tommy Lee as a director, because everybody knows what a terrific actor he is, and we've seen his films, but from the other side of it, from somebody who's taking directions from him.
Well, I've worked with Tommy Lee in I don't know how many projects, but I'd never worked with him as a director before. He wanted me to do something in The Good Old Boys, and I was busy, and he wanted me to do something in the 36 Burials, or whatever that was. And 3.
Only 3. Malachitas.
And it was a wonderful movie. I saw it several times. I told Tommy that I watched it about once a week when I first got the screener. And he said, gets better every time, doesn't it? And I said, yep. And anyway, he hired me to do this part in The Homesman. But he wanted me to do this part, and I went out, and then I'm bad about changing maybe a word here and there, you know, when I'm working. When I'd change a word, Tommy'd say, "No!" That was his direction. I'd change another word, "No!" So that was the direction I got. I told him at the end of it, if I'd been working more than one day, I would have had an argument with him, but one day it's not worth it. But he's good. He's a good guy, and he's real smart, and he's got the social graces of a badger.
Emmy winner Tommy Lee Jones is Woodrow Call.
I hate rude behavior in a man. Won't tolerate it.
His word was law,
Why not go up to Montana?
but his strict code belied a hidden torment.
Now, he's the only son you'll ever have. I don't know that he is my son.
Simon Wincer, tell us about him as a director. He got I think a DGA award, the Emmy, and that canvas of 8 hours of storytelling. That's pretty much of an accomplishment.
Yeah, I've worked with Simon in several different pictures. That was the first one that I worked with him. And then he had me in for Crossfire Trail, which he directed, and Monty Walsh, and something else, I think. But anyway, I like him a lot. He and Bobby didn't get along real well. That's a rumor. I don't know. I wasn't involved in any of that part, but I like him. I like him a lot. Wilford, I think, doesn't like him because Bobby didn't like him, but
Well, nobody likes Wilford either.
well, Wilford, you know, I like Wilford, but he doesn't like me. I wore that hat in Conager.
Try this on then,
Yeah.
right? This is the hat. Luster Bayless is going to be telling you about a little bit later on.
Tommy Lee wore this in Lonesome Dove, but I wore this in Conager, but I wore it more like that.
And that's the way it suits you. Thank you. We are fortunate to have one of the greatest all-time stunt coordinators and stuntmen with us today, Billy Burton, who is going to tell us about some of the horrendous action scenes that were in Lonesome Dove. Okay, Billy, welcome to the big show over again. How did you first get in the business in stunts?
Well, I was rodeoing. I was a rodeo cowboy, and I came to town to work on westerns in Hollywood. And that didn't last long.
What year was that?
Late 1965. And so I was full and sconed in westerns. And about 1972, they had kind of petered out and have gone downhill ever since. But in those days, I was working on every TV show and every western movie there was. Of course, they were all made in Hollywood in those days. I remember listening to Suzanne put this movie together. I wasn't then, and everybody in Hollywood wanted to do it. And I'd read the book, and I was like, I gotta do this. Well, two guys were talking about town that they both had it, and I went, wait a minute, they both got it. So I made a couple calls, and I was driving down the road, and Dick Gallagher, a wonderful human being, called me, and he says, Bill, they want you to do Lonesome Dove. And I went, whoa, you're kidding me. So that was a great highlight, having read the book, couldn't put it down. And I must say, Bill Witliff wrote a screenplay from the book that was probably the best that I've ever read, having done a multitude of movies. It was just amazing. I don't think he's outdone it since. Simon Wincer, I often wondered if he was the correct director for that movie. But you know what, as I analyze it all the years, nobody could have done it any better. For sure. Yeah, good man, and he was perfect for that movie. He was from Australia, you know. I thought, why don't they get an American that knows the West, you know? But no, he was spot on. When you say casting, the best cast in the world, the horses, the wardrobe, the sets, Kerry White, the town, I don't care what it was authentic. And cowboys, real horse people, know the difference. And if it's not right, they do this, you know.
We heard about the cattle drive and about how horrific that must have been. I'm sure you have some stories about moving cattle.
Anyway, the cattle drives were tough. A lot of cattle and a lot of water and a lot of crossings. And I always get the question about the snakes in the river. I think that was the most prolific scene on the river. Well done by Simon Wincer, of course. And we did a fight last spring with Tommy Lee Jones in New Mexico, and he swears up and down the fight that he did with Tony Epper in Lonesome Dove. I'm getting emotional because he just passed. But anyway, he said it's the best fight ever on screen. It was a great fight. When he rescued his son and make an acknowledgement of his son, it was quite a fight, quite a horse fall, and quite a scene.
Emmy winner Tommy Lee Jones is Woodrow Call.
I hate rude behavior in a man. Won't tolerate it.
His word was law.
He comes sliding in on that horse. They call it the bitch horse or something, right?
Hell bitch.
Hell bitch. That's quite a scene, you're right. And he hits him with like a branding iron or
Oh, yeah.
What the hell was that?
He was, well, first of all, he runs a hell bitch in Tony's horse. Tony's horse falls down. He gets off, and he picks up this branding iron. And every actor that's ever done a fight with Jones gets clocked. In fact, he blacked a guy's eye this spring because he thinks you have to get real close to punch somebody. He doesn't realize the technique, and he'll never learn it. To this day, he cannot do a fight. So, and Tony Epper, I know a lot of you know his reputation. Big, strong, fighting machine. I mean, loved to fight. And about halfway through that fight, he told Jones, he says, if you hit me with that brand iron again, I'm going to kick your ass. And then Duvall got all involved, and Duvall had to rope Jones, if you remember, and Bobby was frothing at the mouth. So between Jones and Bobby and Tony, it was a big day. I think it was my last day on the movie when we finished that fight. We got into the scene with Anjelica and everybody.
You know, the movie opens in part one with the stealing the horses and bringing them across the river. That's not easy.
Oh, one of my favorite things, got to bring a guy named Johnny Quijada. I know Luster knows Johnny Quijada, been around since the 40s, and he came down to play Juan Flores. And we actually, when we bring the set of Lonesome Dove was built right on the banks of the Rio Grande River, and over there was Mexico. And we brought those horses across the river, the Rio Grande, into Lonesome Dove. I mean, that's emotional for me. You know, to think that we actually crossed the river with all those loose horses. Of course, we filmed the night scene in Texas, of course. But that's one of my favorite scenes, with all the loose horses coming down the street and Lorene up there in the window waving. And yeah, it's pretty good. The scene I remember talking about nasty, and my friend Bobby Duvall, I think I was the only person on the movie that he liked, because he would talk to me in depth. And he didn't talk to anybody else, especially Simon. And then when it was time for him to go to work, he'd say, I got to go to work. And that was my cue to exit. Because he was getting into being Gus, you know. Anyway, getting back to Blue Duck, when Tommy rode into the camp to capture him, and there was a lot of discussion, and I remember I felt so sorry for Simon Wincer because he told Simon he was going to bite his effing nose off. But I think he was just really just pumped for the scene, for Lonesome Duck, for Blue Duck, that is. And then the window gag, everybody likes that, of course. And there was two stunt guys, obviously. I know people to this day that watch Lonesome Dove at least once a year. They revisit it. That I know that are real horsemen, real cowboys. That's how prolific it is. They sold 1 million copies of VHS the first round at $99 a piece. Do the math on that, baby. And then they released it again on VHS for another $49.95, and I don't know how many they sold, and now they've got all the other copies out. The residuals aren't very good, though.
Let's a big hand for Billy Burton.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. You've got the great directors, the wonderful script, everything is clicking, but you've got to have the right look. Before Lonesome Dove, remember the little tiny hat that Michael Landon would wear on Bonanza, or these silly outfits that people wore, and suddenly it was like you were looking at Matthew Brady photographs and Remington and Russell paintings in the Lonesome Dove. So Luster Bayless got Emmys for the costume design. It just blew everybody away. And after that, people tried to emulate that style in Westerns. They can't do it. You know, Simon Wincer has that eye. The Tom Selleck movies, the Sam Elliott ones, Luster probably helped with those too. And here he is right now, Luster Bayless. Okay, there you go.
I like John Wayne pretty good, you know. I like Eastwood. I like them all, you know. But it's nice to be out there with those Wranglers. You know, you're out there with those Wranglers, and they help you a little bit too. With a hat, I'll tell you, kids, you need to wet that hat down. There's a freedom out there in that. Making a Western, you know?
Well, with the hats, they were so distinctive. They sell the Gus hat now everywhere you go.
Yeah.
How did you match the hats with the performers? Like with Bob Duvall, tell us how that came about.
You got a big head. You got a big head. No, see, I had him on True Grit, and also in the Philippines on a military show. He was wearing a black hat and an officer's hat, but I knew his size, you know. So I told Van Ramsey, I said, Van, well, first I told Van, I called Van. He was over at Universal Studios looking for some clothes, all places. I said, you're in the wrong damn place. You need to get over here and see me. So he came over and I showed him a hat. I said, you put this on. And he'll work. 7/3/8 right on his head. And everybody's looking for the Gus hat now. It's down in Mississippi in my museum. I have to keep it locked up. But everybody's been trying to copy that hat and everything else. But the hat's been around a long time. I would never dare hand Don Wayne a hat. I always threw him on the floor. He'd come in and he'll look around and he'll reach down and he'll see a hat he like and he pick it up and he look at this side, he look at this side. He says, I guess this will work. What else you got to show me? So he was that type of guy. But hats, people don't understand hats. Hats can kill you. You know, make you look like sometimes you have to get out there and teach them. On a film I did with Jimmy Caan and Jane Fonda. Remember that movie? Yeah. I had to get her down on the ground and teach her how to keep the hat on.
Everybody wanted to do that with her. Help her out, as it were.
Yeah. Farnsworth looked good. He had a good hat, chaps, put 2 shirts on him, one to be buttoned up. Later, when he got into Tom Horn, he told Steve McQueen, Steve McQueen said, I want to wear 2 shirts like he did in that other movie. I said, nope, you have to talk to him. He got first bid, you know, 2 shirts. But we was doing Tom Horn. But it's a thing of a hat, how you wear the hat, and we don't want the hat to blow off you and ruin the shot, you know.
You see in a lot of these films the leather cuffs. What is the purpose of those?
Well, when you lasso and things like that, you wrap it around that wrist, right there, because you have to, you know. That's break that, hold that rope from cutting your arm off.
Well, people might wonder when they see a show like this and the hats and the costumes, and they're great and they're made for the specific actor or performer, and they probably assume that the actor gets to keep all that stuff. And what really happens to the hats, the gun belts, the identifiable clothing that the stars wear?
Well, some of them are very priceless. You know, like that hat with you know, it's everybody knows that hat. You know? So I put mine away into a museum. I was making new hats. I aged hats. I knew how to age a hat maker. If you're going to touch it on this side, you're going to be left-handed, you know. And you can tell the guy's habits with the hat. You put a hat back here so you keep your water from running off the back into your head or something, you know. It's all those little things that makes a person's
Well, thank you for the behind-the-scenes secrets on Lonesome Dove, and let's give all of our guests a big round of applause here. Thank you.